the microphones as of yesterday. Just disturbance about phones or places. And I think it's being live streamed as well. Obviously, just to recap the procedure, take a form of structured discussion. We'll try and bring you in at a point, but if you wish to and again, in terms of so that everyone sticks to their too much of an issue. Process. Just in terms of the housekeeping, mentioned yesterday about the should have said action point. Experience at action point hard work. So we'll be to
yes, it is perfectly fine. We have a list of action points.
without further ado, pages or any other questions from the just conscious of is it worth just doing a reminder?
Yes, I'm not aware of any fire alarms that are, or fire tests that the bathroom facilities are out the door left, signposted. In terms of fire escape, there and our evacuation point, Broadway.
Just I think for the bearing in mind of a live stream.
Angela Stewart, Principal.
Good morning. I am Karol Jakubczyk. I'm the Local Plans Manager. I'm David Syme. I'm the strategic. I'm the head of strategic planning at Lewisham.
I'm Nick Fennick. I'm the
Without further ado, move on to the first item, and just ask the council, introducing the topic really, whether the council considering requirements out in policy HO1 general with the
Yes. So yes, the council does feel that the housing requirements set out in policy HO1 is in general conformity with the plan. The Greater London Authority has not raised this as a matter of general conformity nor of soundness. Furthermore, their representation made at publication stage, Regulation 19, welcomes the approach that the council has taken. The only point of note to make is that the GLA did mention our approach of rolling forward the London Plan target beyond the 10-year period of the London Plan. And I'm sure we'll pick that up in further a future question. But the Council notes that this is a tried and tested and established approach which many London boroughs have taken and have gone through examination on. Again, we can provide details and work that my colleague Angela has done to compare that against the London SLA figure and also the capacity of the site allocations, which demonstrates that the Council believes that it can meet those targets, and indeed those targets rolling forward are over and above the London SLA figures. We think it's a pragmatic approach, and once again I'd like to make the point that the GLA did not raise this as a matter of general conformity.
Okay, thank you. And just to make a point, I'm aware, obviously, of the position. You need to test out whether the housing target is appropriate for Lewisham itself. So just because that approach has been adopted, whereas doesn't necessarily appropriate for this London borough. To discuss today and test forward. So in terms of the housing requirement, it's composed of various different components, isn't it? In terms of the London plan target for the first 10 years and rolling that element beyond the years. Then there's the backlog I mentioned, which detail as well. So, and then it's composed of various different elements with to look at, go through the agenda. We'll come back to that question, I think, at the end, come full circle. Just looking at the individual components, and in particular the time period. Now, I am conscious that you've referred to the MPPF, the fact it refers to 15-year, sort of providing a 15-year supply of housing. I think what we do have to be mindful of is when the plan is going to be adopted. Now, if the plan were adopted within the 2024 time period, which could be working on financially, so if the plan were to be adopted, say by the end of 31st of March 2025, then you would have a 15-year time. If it were to be adopted after the 1st of April 2020. Now, I'm sure all of us in this room would like to get the plan adopted. I can't always foresee things that may happen. We will have this commitments things. So I hear what you're saying in terms of 15-year reference and just sort of from the point of view of foolproofing it, and from a safety point of view, is it worth just rolling in terms of the time period? I'm just throwing that out there, just so you're aware of what I wouldn't want to happen for any delay, for whatever reason, that you then wouldn't have a 15-year housing supply.
Yes, thank you. I'll bring my colleague Angela in here, who's done quite a bit of work on this. But I think just in terms of the context, we certainly hope we'll be in a position where we adopt the plan before March of next year. Obviously, this has been quite a lengthy process, and we very, very important for the borough to have an adopted plan which is growth investment within the borough. So hopefully we can work collectively towards that. But I recognise the point that you're making in unforeseen circumstances, and particularly during the period that we have prepared the plan, there has been lots of those. Angela and my colleagues, we've been looking at this, and essentially that would be rolling forward an additional year of target, which obviously rolled forward the London plan, separate discussion that we will have, would be 1,607. So that is possible to roll that target forward. I think there would be a small shortfall in terms of capacity. I do note that the NPPF says that we should specify developable sites or broad locations for growth years 6 to 10, and where possible for 11 to 15. So we could roll forward the target and accept the very small shortfall that we have on the basis that, again, just to reiterate that towards the end of the plan period, we will have a new London plan in place and have a new local case which reflects the targets. But I could hand over to Angela to provide.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify about the 15 years, if we rolled it forward one more year. At the moment, we started 24 as year one, and then we run to 38, 39. That's still one more year left in the plan period. So if we rolled it forward, then it would still go to 39, 40. That would still be a 15-year period. But at the moment, the 15-year supply goes from 24, 25 through to 38, 39. And then we've got one more year afterwards. Plan period ends 39, 40. So if we were to roll forward the 15 years to start at 25, 26.
You'll have the 15-year time period to 20. Moment your housing target only goes to 2030.
Yeah.
Actual, whether you have that additional year's supply.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do both of them, roll forward the supply and the top.
I am very aware that I am very confident. I think I wanted to flag that up. I think as we go through looking at the other components, it may be a case of going. Yeah, I was very confident. And from our perspective, we would like to get through. But just again from experience, I think that we do have some holidays coming up. That in terms of modifications, there's doing and throwing on them. I don't know how fast your procedures are for getting things through council, what delegated powers you have through, but it could all take some. So I just wanted to flag that up because I wouldn't want position.
Yeah, so I mean, we can take that away, and if the solution is to roll the target forward by a year, and that would provide us all collectively with comfort that we have the 50 target, then we can do. We can then come on to the issue of shortfall and capacity. One thing I would say, and I guess this is more broader than this particular point, is we are very confident having going through the kind of development management process and the pre-application process with our development partner industries, that the indicative capacities that we have within the plan will be met and will be more than likely exceeded. Those indicative capacities are a starting point. And I can think of one major site at the moment that we're pre-apping on, which will almost certainly make up the shortfall that we have if we do extend the target beyond or within the planned period. So just to give you that kind of confidence and comfort, but I'm sure we can return to this through.
So you didn't want to over-egg the capacities too much, I think, in setting indicators.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, obviously, Angela's done a huge amount of work in terms of how we've derived at those capacities and capacities for those sites. And I think I mentioned yesterday that these are densities which are incredibly high, particularly within our town centres and within our opportunity areas. So there is, again, I think you're absolutely correct. We didn't want to over-egg the capacity. And where appropriate, through the design-led process, if there is the opportunity to increase from those indicative capacities, then. But that has to be based on, again, the design-led approach, but also an assessment of the impact of.
I think we'll probably come from a circle on this. Just a small point. My understanding is it's in the requirement.
Yes, that's correct. It's part of the requirement, and that's in line with the London plan.
The next question, is it appropriate to make an additional allowance to reflect the current backlog, which consists of and PDF?
Yes, if I may, I'll start and maybe Angela can provide a bit more detail. We do think it's appropriate to accommodate the backlog. And that is what we've done. Essentially, our understanding is that there is two established and generally accepted approaches with dealing with the backlog, which I think have been outlined in our response. The first is the Sedgefield approach, whereby the backlog is catered for by within the first 5 years of the plan period. The second is the so-called Liverpool approach, whereby the backlog is catered across the plan period. Now, our approach thus far and on submission was to use the Sedgefield approach, i.e. meeting that backlog in full during the first 5 years. I think it's fair to say that now that we have fallen into below the 75% threshold of the housing delivery test and the requirement for a 20% buffer on that 5-year land supply, that is proving a very difficult approach for us to meet and take. And Angela's done quite a bit of work on analysing the different approaches through the period. I think it's fair to say that the Council would like to explore the opportunity to review that position and potentially look at the Liverpool approach if possible, but we'll be guided by yourselves, the inspectors.
Yeah, you preempted the direction I think in which I'm going as well. What I was going to say, well, there are a few aspects of that. I mean, I think the 20% buffer is pretty fixed, isn't it? That's something we just have to deal with, really. But that clearly impacts on 5-year land supply, which will come to matter 15 in more detail. But it's also a target as well. I think from our experience, and I wouldn't be wanting to write my report saying there isn't a 5-year land supply. but also I think that's not a position that the council want to find themselves, because in spite of having an adopted local plan, they'll end up in a situation of plan appeal in the absence of. So I think, you know, I was saying to my colleague earlier that in the sessions on site allocations, very rarely do sites end up being brought forward in the trajectory in terms of delivery. Start asking questions about, well, planning application going to come in, how long is it going to take to get the fix signed? Sites tend to push back, so you could end up with much less. So I was going to suggest that the council consider reducing the backlog over 10 years using the Lewisham. You know, and I think there's a question to be asked in terms of how realistic would it be to meet the backlog over a 5-year period anyway, because obviously delivery has been an issue, which has resulted in the need for the 20 buffer. Realistically, would there be enough of a step change to meet an increase in you know, in the target and to meet that backlog of a shorter time period? And that's a question in the back of my mind, whether it would be realistic to do so. But I think certainly the direction I was thinking of going in was actually reducing, you know, using the backlog over a period rather than. I mean, I had asked the council to work that out, hadn't. I've worked it out. So I'd rather you do the calculation now. And my understanding is it would give you 5, not with a significant.
Yes, that's correct. So I looked at a variety of different scenarios. And if you had the 20% buffer plus backlog over 10 years, that would reduce down to 316 units per year compared to the 579 backlog at the moment. And that would then take us over the 5-year deliverable years. I got 5.54. I did wonder whether, I wasn't quite sure about the Liverpool approach and whether you could roll that forward for the full 15 years of the plan, because that would then bring it down to 217 units per year. And then that brings it to 5.83 deliverable years, 5.83.
Would it be possible to provide those?
Yes, definitely.
Are those readily?
They are, yes. These were in relation to the questions that you asked last week. Trying to finalise them.
I mean, it might be useful for us to be able to have a look to our time.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Sorry, we were just checking Canoia was here to take notes of the actions.
I think it would be a safer approach to, and probably a more, you know, realistic approach. I mean, I was going to touch on this in terms of the housing supply session, but in terms of, you know, past delivery rates, does that feel more comfortable in terms of bringing sites forward at that rate?
It certainly does now. Only just a few years ago, we were doing very well in our delivery, 2,000 units a year. But the situation has changed. That would definitely be more realistic to take.
Okay, that's really helpful. singing from the same hymn sheet on that one. In terms of the housing delivery test, as I say, it's something that just needs to be accepted, isn't it? But my question there is in terms of, whether there is the capacity really to accommodate that in the site allocations that we have. I am aware that you've prepared a revised factory. So it'd be quite useful. I know we're touching on housing supply, but it just feeds into the discussion as to how realistic the target is. It would be useful if the council could just confirm the current position on the basis of the updated trajectory on the ability of the council to meet that buffer.
Yeah, so yeah, if I may, I sort of want to take the opportunity to record on record that the council believes that the housing delivery test is fundamentally flawed. That actually, in a housing market where availability and deliverability of land is predominantly owned by private interests, and where the vast majority of our housing is delivered by private developers, penalising local authorities for poor delivery, again, we think is fundamentally flawed. Nevertheless, we accept and we appreciate that the NPPF is clear on this, and a 20% buffer has to be applied. And what I would say is Lewisham has never shirked responsibility of providing and planning for growth that we need. And obviously our plan making process provides evidence of this, and also our robust decision making, which I think we provided evidence of as well, of the thousands of homes that we have planning approval for now. And hopefully you'll have seen that in terms of construction, there is quite a lot happening in the borough. As Angela says, we have a good track record of delivering homes in borough, and it is only very recently, since COVID, that we have dramatically reduced in terms of delivery. And I think the question that we've been asking ourselves is what has changed? What's the reason? Is it an issue of land supply? And fundamentally, the council does not believe it is. We have available land. We have land that could be developed. We have planning applications that could be built. And yet, because of market forces, these homes are not being built. Market forces which are beyond the control of the council. Now, I appreciate this is all contextual and doesn't answer your question directly, but I think it is important to set that out. So what we have been doing is we have been positively planning for that 20% buffer and looking to see where we can realistically apply that buffer in our 5-year land supply. And I think it's important to acknowledge that that is challenging. It's challenging because within a 5-year land supply, we have a significant number of sites that have planning approvals or are being constructed at the moment, and we expect to be delivered at the moment or during the 5-year land supply. So we've provided a background paper that looks at the additional supply, looks at where the 20% could be accommodated. We've looked at the emission sites that were that we had analysed as part of the plan process. We don't believe those emission sites are appropriate and developable sites because of the reasons stated in the additional land supply paper. And even if they were included, they wouldn't be delivered within the 5-year land supply for the various reasons that you pointed out. So I think it's fair to say, and I'll hand over to Angela to provide a bit more detail on the methodology that we've used, but I just want to make the point that we have left no stone unturned here to try to accommodate this 20% buffer. And with the 20% buffer and the backlog using the sedge field, we can't achieve it. It's physically impossible for us to achieve it. We're at about 17.5%. So yes, in light of that unmet need, we've also met with our neighbouring boroughs as part of our South East Duty to Cooperate group, and we have asked them if they have capacity within their 5-year land supply to take that 2.5%. I don't think it will surprise you to note that none of them have capacity to do that for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is that the majority are in the same boat. The majority have failed the housing delivery test. They're in the presumption they also have to find a 20% buffer, or they're in a trajectory which they predict they will fall below that 75% threshold. So we have got written confirmation that they would be unable to meet those needs. We met with them fairly recently in terms of looking at unmet need, which provide you with a copy of their.
I think that it would have been useful to touch on that in the duty to cooperate session, if there have been meetings held more recently. I think it'd be useful to have that record of those discussions appended to the duty to cooperate. The other additional information. I mean, just to be clear, obviously we're focusing on 5-year land supply there and looking at extending the period upon which we deliver the backlog, and obviously that would have a positive effect in terms of the 5-year land supply. But just to be clear in terms of the position on meeting the overall requirement for the planned period, is the council not in a position to meet that, even with doing the additional work to look at uplift on sites and at least a couple of extra? Just to be clear really on that overall position.
Yes, so we have looked at moving sites within and out of the 5-year supply. We've also identified, I think it was 8 new sites coming forward through pre-apps, small sites, which we think will be delivered within the 5 years as well. That brings us to a position where we would have a supply of 30,176 over the 15 years. Yeah. And that would be against a target of 30,145. So it's exceeded by a very small amount.
That's still a more positive position to be in, isn't it? So if you could just clarify in terms of where you found that uplift. So there were 8 new sites identified through the pre-app discussions, but they're smaller sites, so they will be allocated. Whether they should be included within the examination based sessions, or within the small sites target.
Angela, do you have a list?
Yeah, I do have a list. So perhaps if I run through the different sources of supply that we looked at in terms of the uplift, so that we found 539 units from 5 site allocations, which we brought forward into the 5-year supply, but also we knocked back 319 units where we thought that they may no longer be deliverable within the 5 years. So at every stage in this process, from Reg 18 onwards, it's been a very iterative process where we've looked at deliverability, how schemes are progressing through pre-app stages and how they've been getting plan permission. So we've been adjusting the totals the whole way through, and this is just the last set that we have actually done.
Two matters, aren't there? There's the 5-year land supply, and there's moving things within and without the 5-year. But in terms of the overall picture, whether there's sufficient land to deliver the housing requirements, you know, that's what I kind of want to discuss. 5-year land supply to degree, we'll come back to it in the housing land supply session. But in terms of whether sufficient sites to meet the overall target and plan period, and how the council tackled any potential identifying new sites really to meet any shortfall in overall plan period rather than just.
Yeah. Maybe if I can jump in there, I think Angela's set out that in terms of the target for the 15-year plus the backlog plus the 20% buffer, we do have only just, but we do have supply which matches that target. I think we'd have to re-look at the figures if we are to roll forward another year of supply at the 1,667 London plan, which we certainly do in at lunchtime to have a look at that.
I think it's whether the council had to meet, because obviously the 20%, I suppose the 20% buffer on the 5-year land may or may not have implications overall for the housing requirement. It's just whether any new sites have had to as a rather than just 5-year land.
I mean, what I would say is that, again, using the phrase no stone left unturned, there are no future sites. We've done call for sites, we have done officer analysis, we have trawled the borough to look for sites which are available and deliverable. We have looked at the London SLA, we have done our own SLA. Unfortunately, there are no other sites. The only source of supply that I can think of in the future would be comprehensive redevelopment of town centres, which are in multiple land ownership and would be incredibly difficult to deliver. So I just want to really stress and emphasise the point that every site within the borough that we feel is developable and available, we have allocated within the plan. We've also obviously got a quite ambitious target for small sites against what we have achieved previously of 379 units per year. Again, the council is being proactive here, so we've adopted our small sites SPD in October 2021 to encourage delivery of those small sites. We've undertaken a review of all our land holdings. We've identified all small sites that we can either deliver ourselves or we can essentially offer to the open market. That's a programme that's happening at the moment. And we're also going through a project with the government's PropTech fund to develop an AI tool to identify private small sites, which again, we hope will encourage small site delivery. So I think we really have taken an approach which is, you know, pro-growth, pro-development, looking at every opportunity and every site that we think is deliverable.
If I may, just as a footnote to my colleagues' I think very lucid and clear statement, I would just ask the examination to note that there are no serious mission sites being promoted through this process. I think, as my colleague Angela Stewart set out, the council did revisit the sites that were submitted through the plan making process as part of the call for sites process, and and concluded that assessment of sites was correct. I'd reiterate that it feels very lonely in the sessions both yesterday and today, and is not typical of local plan examinations that occur elsewhere, where whilst emission sites are not considered by examinations, emissions participants who are promoting emission sites would tend to attend sessions such as this to explore, to allow the examination to explore avenues that would possibly allow for their consideration through modifications. That's not the case here.
Just to add further that when we were looking at the extra 20% uplift, we did identify 660 new units on existing site allocations by increasing the capacities. And that was mostly in relation to where sites have now advanced pre-app stage. We're more confident that those sites might be coming forward. We did mention before that even though the densities we've been applying are high, because it's within the London context, we have been relatively reserved on some sites where we didn't know the exact capacities of them. But we've added in that new additional amount for those. We also found 7 new sites which are coming forward at advanced pre-app stage as well, and we've added them into the housing trajectory. Those add up to 260 units in total.
Coming back to my question earlier in terms of, whether those are smaller sites which would not necessarily be allocated, come before and not new allocations.
Yeah, they wouldn't be included in the local plan as site allocations. However, in our housing trajectory, we do go down to 25 units, so anything that is included as with planning permission, or in particular these 7 sites which are now at advanced pre-app stage, have been included in the housing trajectory in the figures.
The council have a threshold?
In general, it was 25 units or 0.25 of a hectare, but there are a few site allocations within the plan where we've included smaller sites, and that's because they are crucial to normally the smaller town centres in terms of regenerating those centres. There's a few occasions. I think they're marked with an asterisk on the actual housing trajectory. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that there was sort of agreement on meeting the backlog over a 10-year period, so I didn't raise this, but it's probably fair to flag it up as another way of looking to get a 5-year land supply, and it's just something to flag up for you to think about, and that's the potential for a stepped trajectory. So you would still have the same overall housing land requirement, but it would be lower over the first few years potentially, and it probably needn't to be significantly lower and slightly higher in later years. How that would sit in terms of the London plan, in terms of consistency with the London plan. But I thought I'd just flag it up. There seemed to be an agreement to meet the backlog over 10 years. It seems to me a simpler way to deal with 5-year land supply, but I just wanted to flag that up as an option.
Can I come in there? It was something that we did discuss at the regulation 18 stage, and we discussed it with the GLA as well. Generally, it's not really an approach that they support. Obviously, they have clear targets for the 10 years, and therefore it would be a challenge, I think, for us to meet that 10-year requirement, even with a step trajectory. Effectively, we'd be storing up a lot of problems and issues towards the end of the plan, I would say, or midway through the plan. I think also when we were considering the kind of preparation of the Regulation 18, I think it's fair to say we were much more confident in the delivery of our site allocations. And as Angela says, at that point in 2018, 2019, when we set out on this journey, we were delivering significant amounts of homes per year. Unfortunately, there are issues, and I think it might be me, overstepping the mark here, but I do believe that we need to suggest that our development industry partners need to step up to the plate, really, and actually start delivering the homes that they have planning permission for. If they were to do that, and if they were to build out the outline planning applications that we have, I'm not sure that we would have an issue at all in terms of meeting our targets and meeting our 5-year land supply. The issue is that we're having to effectively take a fairly conservative approach to build out rates and delivery on the intelligence that we are getting from our development partners and shunt these all the way back, essentially.
Yeah, I think it was useful just to flag that up and the JLAs on that. I'm just looking at the questions, the next questions on the agenda. I think to a degree we've covered them in yesterday's session, and I think some of the answers have become very apparent in today's session. In terms of the rationale discounting the local housing need standard methodology figure. And, it is very apparent that it is largely a capacity issue, essentially.
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. I think obviously the council submitted the housing target background paper 2024 LC4 and also the Lewisham Strategic Housing Market Assessment 2022 EB16. And that clearly identifies that the two options have been considered, but it concludes, and the council concludes, that the London plan is responsible for establishing London-wide need and disaggregating this to individual boroughs. Therefore, the current position for the borough is that the minimum housing need figure is 1,667 based on the 2021 London plan target. Again, apologies for this, but it is worth stressing that this is an accepted approach that has been tested through other examination processes, including the London plan examination process and many London borough examinations. I think if we were to suggest, and we did suggest at the early stages of the plan making process of going above and beyond that, we would fall into issues of general conformity with the GLA. And indeed, I think as part of our answer, we've pointed to the Waltham Forest local plan, which was exceeding their London plan target. And during the examination, the appointed inspector concluded that the approach was inappropriate and that it was necessary to reduce the housing requirement to secure general conformity with the London plan. So yes, whilst there is an issue of capacity, there's also an issue of general conformity with the London plan and the fact that it is our strategic planning document, and it is its responsibility to identify London's need and disaggregate that to the local authorities. I would also like to point out that officers have worked incredibly hard through this process to get members to a position where they are accepting, wouldn't use the word comfortable, with the significant growth and change that's going to happen and is evident, you know, if you go to Lewisham Town Centre, etc., if we were to suggest that we had to meet the LHN figure, we would not have political support for the plan. So I think for all of those reasons, we've discounted the LHN figure, but the primary reason is that the London plan is a regional spatial plan document, and it sets out our need.
Yeah, I totally understand that in terms of the first 10 years. So the London plan sets a housing target for each of the boroughs for the first 10 years. And there's a bit of a vacuum beyond those 10 years, and the guidance that the London plan gives in terms of, you know, providing a way forward for authorities to look beyond that 10-year plan period is to look at the SHLA and look at capacities through the 2017 SHLA or any local work that's undertaken. And I have to confess to have struggled to get my head around this a little bit in terms of the different approach that one would normally take in terms of looking at, you know, setting a housing target, which is normally needs driven. So obviously the London SHMA looks at the need with full. And actually the SHMA does go to 2040, the London SHMA. But the target is only set for the first 10 years, and then it's really left to the boroughs to set that target. So I totally see that it would not be in conformity with the London plan to set a higher figure in the first 10 years. I think it's more that period after 10 years where it seems to be more of a capacity-based approach rather than the needs-based approach, which would be the normal approach. So I have totally confess I have struggled to get my head around that a little bit, but that's the guidance in the London plan. And I think in terms of looking at capacities, as you say, there's been a lot of work in looking at potential for increased capacities in terms of, you know, setting a target beyond those 10 years. And I think that the council's probably followed that approach that the London plan has recommended in that.
That's correct. We did take into account the guidance that's in the London plan. We looked at the London SHLA, so the figures that are within the 10-year target are based on phases 2 and 3 of the SHLA, whereas there's also phase 4 and 5. Those figures for our borough are actually lower than the target for the first 10 years. So if we were to just carry on the approach from the SHLA, then we would have actually had a dip in our actual target. But we felt that looking at the capacity in the borough, that we could still maintain that target at the level beyond the 10 years. So that's what we've done. It also talks about increasing the target in line with things like new transport capacity that might be coming online. And we obviously considered that with the Bakerloo line, but we haven't actually increased the target because of the uncertainties in terms of delivery on that. We did hint at the fact that the capacities can be increased if need be. We've also got within the plan itself references to be able to review the situation should the London plan target be increased in the future. I know that they are now starting to work on the new London SHLA. So that will be coming forward in the next 18, 20 months.
Just to be clear, there's obviously the 2017 SHLA, which is out of date now. And obviously in terms of updating the trajectory, that those capacity figures have been updated. Was there a formal, you referenced, you know, a local SHLA. Has there been a formal local SHLA produced, or is it by way of updating the house?
It's not a formal SHLA as such, but we've gone through a SHLA-like process in the site allocations background paper. And there's every site has been looked at in terms of deliverability, achievability, suitability. The starting point for all of the site-based work was where we've looked at the SHLA results from 2017 from the London one, and we've reassessed those. Obviously, time has gone by. We have increased some of the capacities within those. We also looked at a few sites in the London SHLA which were low probability or not suitable. Over the course of time, we now believe that they are deliverable, so we've added them in. It has been an iterative process. The London SHLA has been the starting point for our work, but we've continually updated. And the site allocations background paper is the one that gives the full determination of how we've gone about that.
In terms of the site allocations background paper, which is acting as law, part of that process, did the council go back out with a call for sites?
We've been out for 3 call for sites, I believe, through the different regulation consultations. At each stage we have assessed those new sites that have come forward, and we've added some into the supply where we felt that they were suitable. Others we don't believe are suitable, and we have done a recent review as part of the 20% uplift, and we still don't believe that they're suitable as development sites at the moment. And that's because mostly the odd mall land or other think land, other designated land that we believe need to be retained for those purposes. Also, there's a few sites which were designated employment land. Obviously, there's a conflict there with what the JLA are telling us in terms of maintaining our employment land supply as well.
When was the last call for sites?
Yes, I seem to recall, and we'll get the exact date for you, but during the kind of Regulation 19 consultation, if we can get that date.
Also, in the site allocations background paper, there's a number of appendices at the back, and those set out the approach to how we've identified all the different sites, and that includes the call for sites in there. It has an itemised description of where we've excluded them or included them. I think that's in Appendix B. It's Appendix A, I think.
Yeah, if we could double check that the date as an action point. So just in terms of the next question, you know, how far short is the identified capacity short of the LHN figure?
In our response on matter 4, in question 4.7, we do set out that there was 4,835 dwellings less than the standard capped method. That may be a slightly, yeah, no, sorry, that is the most up-to-date figure that we've got. That's after taking into account the 20% uplift work that we've done.
Important to note that that doesn't then include the additional year.
Yeah, I think the council will need to look at whether that additional could be accommodated within the. So that's and get the calculator out. So the capacity really will be somewhere between the, assuming we roll forward the London plan target, will be somewhere between that and the LHN. So it is being more ambitious than. I think in terms of my next question, whether the approach of rolling forward the London plan to housing target for the remainder of the plan period based on realistic assumptions of demographic growth, I think comes from my my usual approach to assessing the housing target, which is a needs-based approach. But I think I just wanted to explore the implications, demographic point of view, in terms of not meeting the housing need that's been identified as part of the LHN, and you know that the implications in terms of not meeting you know that any growth in households, for example, who then can't be accommodated because there'll be potentially shortfall of housing, and you know implications in terms of not being able to fulfil jobs potentially that you know that are generated in the borough, and any implications for commuting, etc. I think those are the sorts of things that would normally be considered as part of looking at a SHMA and the implications target for the population of the borough. But I think it's just a slightly different approach in the London authorities. But I just wanted to explore really the potential implications of not meeting the LHN figure. Your point of view.
Could you clarify, is that meeting the LHN figure over the course of the plan period or beyond the 10-year period?
I think over the course of the plan period, really, because I mean, obviously, according to the LHN calculation, there will be, you know, certain growth in the number of households, which would then normally be used to set your housing target in order to meet that growth in households. But obviously, by not meeting that need, which is the case here, that growth in number of households cannot be accommodated. And I just wondered what consideration being given to the potential implications of that for the borough. Your point of view.
In terms of the kind of formal process, I think again, just to be clear, we believe that the London plan sets out the target, and therefore, you know, we have taken that as our starting point and our approach for developing the plan. In terms of answering the question, you know, we definitely accept that there is an acute housing crisis in Lewisham, in London, and across the nation. And there is an acute affordability issue in London and in Lewisham. You know, again, I think we've set out our kind of response robustly. It isn't the council shying away from trying to meet ambitious targets. We have done all we can, and we are trying all we can to accommodate growth within this borough. We simply, you know, cannot meet, physically cannot meet those kind of targets. So yes, there are going to be kind of implications, but again, I would draw the inspector's attention to the fact that we have a London plan, and that is a strategic matter which is dealt with by the London plan and considered by the London plan.
As a factual point of clarity, and I will seek to keep this mercifully brief, Lewisham does not have its own housing market area. Lewisham sits within a capital-wide, a London-wide housing market area. So, to reiterate my colleague's point, without wishing to shirk away from our responsibilities of meeting, genuinely meeting the real needs that are present across Lewisham, that those particular issues and concerns that you raised around housing need not being consumed, or there not being accommodation, or the availability of workforces to meet employment needs, that's considered within London, within a London-wide context. As somebody who works widely outside of the capital, I appreciate that's something I'm hesitant to use the word unique, but it is something that is particular to London, and is considered differently elsewhere.
So just to emphasise that throughout the whole of the plan making process, we have been using the housing and population projections that the Greater London Authority provide. We do almost annual updates on these things, and we do actually input our housing data to them, so that they can generate for a preferred option projections. We did do some analysis between their general projections and the borough preferred projections, that actually it doesn't really make much difference in terms of the actual outcomes of the growth that is predicted. I think in that way we have been aligned with the London plan. Also in the SHMAR, it did use the most up-to-date housing projections at the time as well.
DLA use their own method, don't projecting.
And I do know that the latest ones that we have used did take into account COVID as well. The latest version is after the COVID event, so in terms of migration and things like that.
Just moving on to my next question in terms of justifying deviating from the standard method, totally appreciating that we're in a different context here. Just looking at the planning practice guidance, I think the guidance most pertinent, I think, to this situation is where an alternative approach results in a lower housing than identified using the standard method. The strategic policy making authority will need to demonstrate using robust the figures based on realistic growth, which is and that there are exceptional local circumstances that justify deviating standard methods. Questions came from in demographic growth. I think I understand the council's position in terms of what those exceptional circumstances, partly being the London, working within the London plan framework and the capacity issues. But if the council did have anything to add to that at stage under that.
I don't think the council has anything further to add.
Just checking the time, we made quite good progress, haven't we? So I think we explored, you know, in terms of the spatial strategy, the integrated impact assessment. We explored, you know, the different scenarios that were looked at growth. So I didn't really want to revisit those today. I do think that it would be beneficial to adjourn potentially to after lunch, from the point of view of just giving the council time to think about the matter just this morning in terms of the different options, looking at the backlog, step trajectory, and also extending the requirement period to the and it would also, if there are additional figures that have been produced, it would give ourselves those. So I think it would be useful to use that time, come back this afternoon, just that approach and see how far we. Is that approach acceptable to?
Yes, that would be extremely helpful, yes.
So we can go much further, I think, session. Time to take stock. So just in terms of those additional calculations, looking at meeting the backlog over the 10-year period, it'd be really useful if we had those as soon as possible. We can look at those recess.
Yeah, we'll ping those over as soon as we get out and double check them.
And I think that this afternoon it would just be a case of you know, updating us, council's thoughts, and if there are any, if you do get the chance to look at the figures in terms of rolling forward that period to 40, it would be great for us to have as soon as possible. Look at them in a moment, and then I think we can come back and have a really useful discussion, hopefully, way forward. Shall adjourn until, is 2 o'clock okay? Does that give sufficient time? Thank you.